we continue to hear that uncertainty, unpredictability within the regulatory process, it adds time, it adds money, and you know, when you mention the length of time that it takes to permit a mine in this country nowadays, Mr. Russell, you know, the two projects that you mentioned in Alaska, 22 years for one, 16 for another. For many, they would just walk away. You look at the reality of the process here, and it does cause you to wonder how we're even able to have much of a mining industry in this country. You know, we speak about how the United States is ranked literally at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to permitting for mines in this country. I've also heard about how other countries, specifically Canada and Australia, have a competitive permitting, well, it's a permitting process, I guess, that gives them a competitive advantage. Now, we have had some issues with some of the mines that we're seeing come on in Canada, but can you speak just very briefly to the permitting process that we see in other countries that, again, allow for a more clearly defined or certainly more predictable process that allows these projects to move forward, while here in the United States it may be a 2-decade process?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I have experience in permitting in both those countries, Canada and Australia, and I think the key difference is that there is a time frame established at the beginning. The roles and the responsibilities of the cooperating agencies are well defined, so that there is certainly more predictability that the process will take 2 years or 3 years, and then there will be a decision. What we have
there's
is
accountability at the end of that.
There's also
period?
accountability, so that if an agency is not moving within its time frame, there is accountability. So that's a key aspect that's lacking in our system, is that even if schedules are established, there is no accountability to meet those schedules.
Mr. Kaysen, you, in your testimony, had mentioned that an average EIS is now about 4.6 years, and we think about the reality of that and what that then means to cost, uncertainty, lack of predictability. During the Obama administration, President Obama acknowledged that permitting challenges were an impediment. They held back growth and opportunity, and in his 2012 executive order, he pushed us to work through some of the permitting challenges. And then when President Trump comes into office, he updated that in August of 2017. What actually have we seen then? If we're still sitting at about 4.5 years for processing of an EIS, we've had administrations, Republican and Democrat, that have said permitting is a challenge. They've laid down executive orders saying we need to do better than this. Have we accomplished anything?
Accomplished at this point, I think, is pretty thin, but we are working on the issue. We have several things that are going on at the same time to try to address this issue. I say broadly in the administration, recognize that the NEPA process is taking way too long. You've quoted almost 5 years to get an EIS done. And there's a couple things that are involved in that. First is that the length of EISs keeps getting longer and longer and longer. The last two that I saw was 5,000 pages and 10,000 pages. And
is it necessary that the EISs get longer? Why?
No.
I mean,
no.
If we acknowledge that this is part of our challenge here, why are things getting longer and more complicated?
My opinion about that is that a lot of the length is generated by two things. The first is a lot of contractors get paid by the page, and so the more pages they write, the more they make. And secondly is fear of litigation. We have a fairly long record where EISs are found, no matter what their length, to be insufficient, and so you need to add more and more to it. So we've been trained basically to make them longer and longer and try to anticipate every possible question that anybody in the world might want to have an answer to, and try to incorporate that in EISs to offset the fear of litigation. I don't think that's the way it has to be. We're currently working with CEQ and with the White House and across the executive branch to take a fresh look at how we do NEPA compliance. And we're going through a process right now within Interior where our Deputy Secretary has issued a secretarial order that basically puts a page limit and a time limit on our NEPA compliance documents. It remains to be seen whether we'll be able to deal with litigation using these reduced page limits. But what we're going to try to do is move in a direction, instead of having a 10,000-page EIS, have an EIS that's 300 pages or less and gets done in a year to 2 years. So we're currently going through the process with a NEPA subgroup inside Interior, which I chair, to look at the entire NEPA process to figure out what can we cut out, what can we streamline, how can we write these better so that we can do them in less volume and less time. So that's an active process we're going through in concert with CEQ.
Thank you. And I recognize that the number of pages is not the end-all and be-all, it's the content in there.
Right.
I certainly hope that you don't work to reduce the font because it's already tedious enough to get through. Let me go to Senator Cantwell.